Hey guys, Dr. Alex Ritzy here, and welcome to another episode of the Better Ever After podcast. And for this week's podcast, I was really excited about the topic we were going to talk about, and then I read something, and if you've ever had this experience before where you're really excited about something, maybe it's a project you're going to work on, a paper you're going to write, or some sort of creative endeavor, and then you read something or watch something or expose to something and it totally blows it up. Yeah, that happened. So this weekend I started reading the Mark Manson book called Everything is That's what the title of the book is. He is the author who wrote The Subtle Art of Not Giving Both books, fantastic. But in reading his most recent book, that Everything is Effed, it's much better than the title sounds. In reading this book, it changed what I was going to talk about this week. And what I was going to talk about this week was behavior change. Because ultimately, I could give you guys everything in the world in terms of knowledge and understanding about the body and pain and science and what to do. But if you don't actually execute or do it, it's kind of useless. And so what I was thinking about with the run-up to this podcast is giving some tips in order to make your new or your health goals stick better, to actually produce and yield some change in your behavior so that the thing that you want is the thing that you achieve. And I'm still going to talk about that, but I'm going to focus on something that Mark Manson talks about in his book, and that was initially part of my list, but frankly, it's just the most important thing to talk about, so we're going to highlight that first and foremost, and then we're going to talk about some of the other parts that are still going to be useful. So in his book, Mark Manson talks a lot about understanding why people do what they do. He talks a lot about the thinking brain versus the feeling brain, and that emotion and how we feel is really the biggest factor for determining what we do with our lives or what we do in certain instances. And that's why in, let's say, a Thanksgiving dinner, you could be sitting down with your wacky aunt or uncle and you get into a political argument and you guys could yell facts back and forth at one another, but we're not going to change each other's minds because facts rarely make us do things. It's the feelings or the beliefs or the values or the meaning that we attach to those facts. And so we've talked about this before in talking about a book like Simon Sinek's Start With Why, and that your meaning, your values, and your purpose, your why, is really, really, really important in determining the direction that your life goes. So in terms of making behavioral changes to either make our health or our life better, a lot of it is going to come down to our values, our beliefs, and our purpose. And that is going to be the energy or the fuel or the feeling that actually causes us to make a change. And so if we have a goal of changing something about our health, and with this, I'm going to use an example of say, my morning routine / you stretching or exercising more. You know, I could tell you over and over again that stretching is really good. It's going to reduce injuries. It's going to reduce pain. It's going to do all these great things. Heck, it's going to make you be able to surf and ski and run when you're 65 years old if you do it the right amount. But that might not motivate you to do it or make you do it in the same way that telling a smoker that smoking is going to kill them is not going to make them change the behavior. That, by the way, only works like 2% of the time. But what might make somebody change their behavior is attaching the outcome of that behavior to a feeling or something that's really, really important to you in your life. And so, for me, when I think about my stretching and morning routine, what motivates me, what feeling makes me get up at 5:45 in the morning to do it, it works backwards like this. When I'm older, I want to be able to do really cool stuff and travel around the world. The fear I have of not doing that is very, very strong. Also attached with the outcome of that morning routine, you know, the less pain, better health, better mobility, it's going to allow me to be better at cycling, to be faster. It's going to allow me to do anything that I want, say go on a hike, go for a swim, be really athletic. Those things all have meaning to me. They're part of my my purpose, or they're part of my identity. And so a lot of the outcomes from the activity, the morning routine, have deep ties to the meaning, or deep ties to meaning in my life. So if I say it's 5:45, am I going to hit snooze? Because no, I don't want to take a snooze on the doing cool stuff when I'm older, being faster on the bike, being able to go for a hike anytime I want, etc., etc. If I'm just hitting snooze or not doing that stretching because my chiropractor told me to, it's much easier to not do it or not hit that snooze button. We have to have meaning, a why, a purpose behind that activity. And so when you want to make a health change, how would I think it has to look as follows? We have to have an activity that is going to yield a likely benefit, and that benefit has to have some meaning to us. So we have to figure out backwards what's really important to us in our lives, our purpose, our mission, our meaning. How can we attach that to a specific outcome? Weight loss, being more flexible, being faster, whatever it might be. And then one step over, what activity is going to get us there? And so we really have to work backwards, understanding ourselves, our meanings, our values, and our purposes when we pick a health goal. Because if it's January 1 and you say, oh, I want to lose 20 pounds, if there's not something really connected to that in terms of something in your life that's really important, maybe it's you don't want to die. Maybe it's being able to have less pain in your knees because you weigh less. I don't know what it is, but it has to be something really, really valuable and really important to you. So the next time that you want to change something in your health, make sure that it's tied to something very valuable to you and that's in line with your belief systems, your identity, something along those lines so that you can put something meaningful behind it. Because if you don't, it's probably not that important to do it in the first place, or you're not going to have any success at it. And sometimes, you just have to simply make some sort of random connection, if you will, to give it meaning, but it has to be meaningful. It's going to have to motivate you. And so once you have that down, once you have this goal that's going to be really meaningful to you in the end, or something that's going to help you stay accountable, there are a bunch of behavioral things that you can do, and that's what I'm going to talk about now. And that's what the initial podcast was going to be about. But I know that if I didn't talk about the feeling brain, or making sure that our goals are meaningful, then we're never going to achieve it in the first place. So first things first, only pick one thing to change at one time. So don't add 6 new things at once to do. It's hard to focus on one thing. It's easy to do one, not do the other, and say, oh, at least I was successful at one. Pick one health goal at a time and start from there. The second thing we want to do when we want to make some sort of behavioral or health change is it has to be based on an intent or an action and not an outcome. And so if we're using weight loss, or if we're using our mobility routine as our health change, we need to make sure that it's the intent or the actual action of, in the weight loss case, going to the gym, doing the things you need to do with your nutrition, getting your sleep, etc., or actually waking up at 5:45 to do the stretching. Things that you're going to have control over, because ultimately you might not have control over how flexible you become from doing the mobility routine or how much weight you lose, but what you do have control over is what should be the health change or the goal that we're shooting towards. Because if we don't feel like we have control over it, it's going to be depressing and frustrating. So you have to make sure that you are picking something that is a behavioral and intent and action change and not a specific outcome. The next thing, and while I talked about the feeling brain versus the thinking brain, the next thing is actually making sure you have lots of knowledge. And that's the know-how to do what you're going to do. So if we're talking about stretching, or if we're talking about weight loss, this is where the more knowledge that you have, the more stretches that you know, the more steps that you need to know in terms of weight loss, that stuff's really important. We know that knowledge alone is not an instigator of change, but it's a really, really important precursor. Knowing the benefits, knowing the risks of not doing said change, these can be really, really important motivating factors as well. And when we talked about the meaning behind our goals, if you say no, that smoking is going to kill you. That's a really important piece of knowledge that is going to play into our meaning, our motivation, etc. for achieving that goal. The next thing that's really important is give it time. We know that creating a behavioral change can take anywhere from 15 days, according to some sources, to months, and for it to really stick, it could even be, well, probably not years, but many months. And this is where I've talked about before, establishing rituals where we're not just, doing a diet, we're not just doing something temporary. This should be a change that you're going to be able to continue for months, years, and hopefully decades, that if you build it into a regular routine or ritual, if it's once a month to every single day and you stick to it, you know that it's going to lead you in the right direction by using that action or that behavior over and over and over again. It's going to point you in the direction that you want to go to achieve a certain outcome. So obviously, if you stretch once a week, will your flexibility and mobility get better? Yeah, probably, but not as good as 7 times a week. Now, wherever you fall on that curve is obviously going to point you in a different direction. You do something more often, it's going to shoot you in a better direction with a more likely chance of the outcome that you want. The next thing that's really important is asking for help. I think that regardless of what we're doing with our lives, it's always best if we can stand on the shoulders of giants. So whether that means having a coach, whether it's having a trainer, whether it's having a knowledgeable friend explain or show you how to do something, really, really, really important. You can save time, money in the long run, and energy by having a coach or having somebody that's been successful at this before show you what to do. It's also really good, and it bleeds into the next point, of having somebody or something you are accountable to. So whether that is somebody you pay, whether that's a family member that you've told, hey, I'm working towards this, can you keep asking me about it, keep me encouraged, keep me accountable, or using some sort of app. And there's lots of different accountability apps that you can look up online that I haven't used personally, but I know have worked really, really well for other people and other authors that I have read about. So accountability groups, telling a friend, and then standing on the shoulders of giants and asking for help from those that have done it before or at least know how to do it, a really important step for changing any health behavior. And then the last 2 things, second last point, if you can, do stuff with friends, do stuff in a group, and similar to having an accountability group, if you're able to gamify things or hang out with friends and achieve an activity and make it fun and make it a challenge, that's going to make it a lot easier to work towards that health goal by doing that behavior. So that's where, like, if you find a group that you love running with, or you love going spinning with, or that you love doing something together, amazing. Or maybe it's an online community, and a good example is like an online community that uses this Zwift platform for cycling. You hop on your bike and you're cycling with hundreds or thousands of other people online from all over the world. Not only is it cool to gamify it, but you have this community that can either A, keep you accountable, or you feel like you are a part of something. And then the last point is probably what we think of first, and that is to make your environment more suitable to achieving your goal. So if we're talking about something nutrition, step number 1, make sure that anything that's going to lead you off track or any of those vices, things like that, they're not in your house. If it's going to the gym early in the morning, change the environment. Make sure you have all your warm stuff right beside the bed so that when you roll out of bed, it's not too cold, it's not going to stop you. That your bag is already packed to go to the gym for the day before. What we want to do with our changing our environment is make sure that there are as few obstacles as possible to stop us from doing that action to achieving that goal. And so every impediment that you could encounter is something that's going to slow our brain and our bodies down from getting through that action or that intent, whether it's not having a yoga mat to do your stretching or not having a space. These are things that are going to derail you. You'll probably have this from experience where you've tried to do it before. Learn from that experience of whatever stopped you from going to the gym, or when you try to execute it, make a note. How can I overcome this small environmental obstacle so that it doesn't bother me in the future? Oh, and I forgot one more thing. When you pick goals, make sure they're achievable and start small. You don't have to go from 0 to 100. If you want to lose a little bit of weight, don't try to lose 40. Start with 5 or 10 pounds and the actions that are going to map to that. Because when we can see progress, when we can see our numbers and our values and our statistics changing, that gives us hope and encouragement, and it's much easier to move a small distance and feel encouraged than to try and surmount a mountain and get really discouraged. So make it a small, attainable goal, pick up some momentum, and when that snowball starts to roll, that's when you can pick something really massive to shoot towards. So guys, I hope that was helpful today. I hope that some of these tips are gonna help you reach your goals, whether in the new year or starting next week, by making sure that there is something that are meaningful to you and that you use some of those behavioral and environmental changes to make doing those actions and reaching those goals even better. So thank you guys again for tuning in to another episode of the Better Ever After podcast. I always want to see you guys get a little bit better each week, and I hope this does it for you again. Take care.